The Escambray Mountains rise from the heart of Cuba, a fortress of emerald peaks and deep valleys draped in mist. Waterfalls cascade into hidden pools, their music a constant presence in the humid air. To this day, the mountains whisper with secrets, their slopes bearing witness to a brutal chapter in Cuban history, a conflict largely forgotten by the outside world, the Escambray Rebellion. This is not a story easily told, for it speaks of brother fighting brother, of hope betrayed, and of a revolution that devoured its own children. It is a story of courage and desperation, of unwavering idealism clashing with the harsh realities of power. Most of all, it is a story about the human cost of conflict, the scars etched deep within families and communities that endure to this day. The year 1959 dawned bright with possibility in Cuba. Fidel Castro's bearded revolutionaries, triumphant after years of guerrilla warfare, marched into Havana, promising liberation from the corrupt Batista regime. The air crackled with hope, with the promise of a more just and equitable society. The Cuban people, weary of oppression and inequality, embraced the revolution with open arms. Land redistribution promised a better life for impoverished farmers. Nationalization of industries offered the prospect of economic independence. For a brief, shining moment, it seemed that Cuba was on the cusp of a new era. However, the seeds of discontent were sown even as victory celebrations filled the streets. The new government, consolidating its power, began to silence dissent. Freedoms were curtailed in the name of revolutionary purity. The embrace of communism alienated many who had initially supported Castro. Among those who felt betrayed were farmers who found themselves collectivized, stripped of the land they had just gained. Others, fearing religious persecution or the loss of their hard-won businesses, watched the revolutions unfolding with growing trepidation. In the Escambray Mountains, a bastion of independent spirit, resistance began to flicker. Who were the Escambray rebels? They were a diverse group, united by their opposition to the revolution's increasingly authoritarian turn. There were disillusioned revolutionaries, men who had fought alongside Castro, but now questioned his methods. There were farmers, fiercely independent, who refused to surrender their land to the collective. The government, eager to discredit the opposition, labeled them all bandidos, bandits and counter-revolutionaries. While it is true that some rebels received support from the CIA and exiled Cuban groups, many fought simply for their vision of a free Cuba, a vision that diverged sharply from the path Castro had chosen. Section 5. La Limpia, the Cleansing Storm. The Cuban government's response to the growing insurgency was swift and brutal. In 1960, they launched La Limpia, the Cleansing, a massive military campaign aimed at crushing the rebellion. Over 100,000 soldiers and militia, many of them barely more than boys, were deployed to the Escambray. Villages were evacuated, their inhabitants suspected of aiding the rebels. Suspected collaborators were imprisoned or sent to work camps. The mountains echoed with the sounds of gunfire and the rumble of artillery. For 5 long years, the Escambray became a battleground, a place of terror and bloodshed. Section 6. Echoes of Battle. Blood soaks the soil. The Escambray Mountains, for all their beauty, provided a brutal setting for the conflict. The rebels, intimately familiar with the terrain, used the dense forests and treacherous slopes to their advantage. Government forces, often ill-equipped and poorly trained, struggled to root them out. The fighting was savage and unforgiving. Ambushes were common, and casualties mounted on both sides. Prisoners were rarely taken. Stories abound of atrocities committed by both sides, summary executions, torture, and reprisals against civilians. The soil of the Escambray, fertile with life, became saturated with the blood of young men. Section 7. Scars on the Soul. A nation divided. The Escambray Rebellion left deep scars on the Cuban psyche. Thousands died in the fighting, their families left to grieve in silence. Thousands more were imprisoned or forced into exile. Communities were shattered, torn apart by suspicion and fear. The conflict also deepened divisions within Cuban society. Those who had supported the revolution found their faith tested by the brutality of La Limpia. Those who had opposed Castro were further alienated, driven underground or into exile. A climate of fear and suspicion settled over the island, stifling dissent and silencing open debate. Section 8. A Civil War Undecreed. History's long shadow. Was the Escambray Rebellion a civil war? The question remains a subject of debate to this day. The Cuban government has consistently downplayed the conflict, portraying it as a minor uprising by bandits and counter-revolutionaries. However, the scale of the fighting, the duration of the rebellion, and the deep divisions it exposed suggest something far more profound. Regardless of its official designation, the Escambray Rebellion stands as a stark reminder of the human cost of revolution. It is a cautionary tale about the dangers of unchecked power, the seductive allure of ideology, and the ease with which brother can turn against brother. Section 9. Conclusion. The unquiet legacy of the Escambray. The Escambray Mountains, for all their beauty, remain haunted by the ghosts of the past. The whispers of the wind through the trees seem to carry the echoes of gunfire, the cries of the fallen. The conflict, largely forgotten by the outside world, continues to cast a long shadow over Cuba, a reminder of the complexities of its revolutionary history. It is a legacy that demands to be remembered, not to reopen old wounds, but to understand the forces that shaped modern Cuba. It is a story that speaks to the enduring human spirit, the courage to fight for one's beliefs, and the enduring power of hope, even in the face of overwhelming odds.